All right, I think I'm live. I'm pretty sure I am. Maybe. I can't really tell if I am or not, but hey, welcome everybody. It's BlastCapBadger here. So, before I jump into anything else or do the video or nothing, I'm going to tell you something. There's a secret way to support the channel to free up more of my time for the channel and then just get me to do everything and anything under the sun without me having to worry about YouTube shutting me down too much. And the way to do that is actually in the chat right now. So join the channel, become a member of the BlastCapBadger channel in order to help me do more crazy things that you like to see without having to worry about all the dumb stuff. So that being said, make sure you click that link in the chat and make sure you like, share, and you chat with the live stream. So today we're doing some Mr. Ballin. So you ready for this? I'm ready for this. Let's not, take away too much time from all this. So, Mr. Ballin. Feral people hunt teen hiker. A wild person appeared. Y'all ready for this? Hey, make sure when you get in here, you like the live stream, okay? Make sure you get into the chat. Let's jump into it. So this is Mr. Ballin. Let's see what happens.
In 2008, a teenager was hiking through a very dense forest in Northern California when he decided to stop and make camp for the night. He walked several hundred feet off the main trail into the forest where he found a small clearing, and there he would set up his tent and he would climb inside and go to sleep. A few hours later, he would wake up because he thought he heard something outside of his tent. But there were no windows on his tent, and it was totally pitch black outside, so he can't see anything. And so he's just laying there listening, trying to discern what's going on outside. And as he's laying there, he hears it again. And it's the sound of footsteps slowly approaching his tent. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please hide a Bluetooth speaker in the like button's bedroom, and then proceed to play Siberian Husky screaming audio at full volume all night long. Also, please subscribe to our
That sounds so terribly mean. What did the like button ever do to you? Come on now. Or wait, is the like button the bad friend? In that case, they deserve every little bit of torture you send their way. Let's continue.
Channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Love Mr. Ballin's intro. Let's do it. All right. The following story is based on an unverified first-hand account by a Reddit user. Their name has been changed. So maybe this story isn't true. Maybe this story isn't true. I mean, especially if it's coming from Reddit. Reddit is a cesspool. An absolute cesspool of people who think of themselves way too highly and post just whatever. And as long as they spout like a lot of leftist propaganda stuff, they can do whatever they want. That's Reddit. Like, it surprised me to no end that I found a Mr. Ballin subreddit on Reddit that's doing okay-ish. I don't know how he does it. But let's continue.
In 2007, the now famous cult classic movie Into the Wild was released to movie theaters for the first time. The movie, which is based on a true story, centers on the life of a young man named Christopher McCandless. In 1990, Christopher graduated from a really good school with honors, and by all accounts, he could have gone on to get a really good, high-paying job, but Christopher didn't want a job. He wanted freedom. And so, without telling his parents, because they would not have been happy about this idea, he gave away all of his possessions, he gave all his money to charity, and he headed off to Alaska to live off the grid by himself. He eventually would find this rusted out old city bus in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness.
Damn, that man. People think I look like a lumberjack. This is a true lumberjack right here. This is a true lumberjack kind of look to him right now. Seriously, there you go. There you go.
And he would make this bus his shelter, and he would live inside of this bus for 113 days before he unfortunately died of starvation. While Christopher's story is obviously tragic, the movie about his life, Into the Wild, really focuses on Christopher's unrelenting spirit and his constant drive towards getting the thing he wants the most, which is freedom. And so at the end of this movie, the audience is left feeling not sad, but inspired to take big risks in life and seek out adventure before it's too late. One audience member who was totally inspired by Christopher McCandless's life story was an 18-year-old young man named Matt Higgins who lived in Oregon. Matt was about to graduate high school, and unlike a lot of his peers, he had no idea what he should do after graduation.
I mean, I get it. Look, I get it. I really do. Living off the grid, away from civilization, out in nature like we were originally way back in the day. I get it. I understand. Still, it'd be kind of hard to separate yourself from what you got going on right now to that kind of lifestyle, right? So you have to really want it, I think. And the people that really want it, hey, my hat's off to you.
Whether it was get a job or go to school. But after watching Into the Wild, a third option appeared to him, which was to head off into the wild, just like Christopher McCandless had done, except not permanently. Matt quickly fell in love with this option. He viewed it as a chance to kind of take a break from reality and go find himself. And then at the end of his stint in the wild, he could come back and, get a job or go to school. And so Matt's official Into the Wild plan was that he would graduate in 2007, and then in the spring of 2008, he would hike the entirety of the California section of the infamously rugged and beautiful Pacific Crest Trail. And he would do this all on his own.
Bub, that is a serious freaking endeavor. Serious freaking endeavor. So me and a few of my teammates, while we were on leave, we've done this trail. Except we actually ended up heading all the way into Washington State. Man. I mean, it was fun. It was rough. We were armed. We had a couple of run-ins with some strange people, but nothing we weren't able to handle together. But that's the key. We had each other. And we treated it like we did most missions. Somebody stays up, does watch, walks around the camp, makes sure nothing's going on, and then after 4 hours, wakes up the next person. They get up, the other person goes to sleep, and we cycle like that throughout the nighttime until it was time to get up in the morning, eat some food, and head out again. That's the key difference between this and what we did. We were all together, all right? Myself and my team. This dude's alone. He's alone. He's probably unarmed. And he probably doesn't have a very good chance. Look, anyone by themselves, even myself, even me, even like, Navy SEALs, Rangers, MARSOC guys, the best of the best of the best, hiking by themselves anywhere, especially something like this. Nobody's Superman. Nobody's invincible, and nobody is indestructible. We are mortal creatures. So if he's doing this by himself, there's only one inevitable assumption to be made about the end results of this. Man, damn. By the way, make sure you like the live stream when you get in here, please, so I know exactly how many people are actually watching. Thank you.
Section of the Pacific Crest Trail that he planned on hiking was roughly 1,700 miles long. It began on the border of Mexico in Southern California, and it wound its way north up to the border of Oregon. The trail cut through deserts and up and over mountains, and there was lots of dangerous wildlife to contend with. And on top of that, there were many points along this trail where hikers were very isolated. They were not anywhere near civilization, and so if anything were to happen to them, they'd be on their own. And so naturally, this hike was not a beginner hike. However, Matt was not a beginner hiker. He had grown up hiking and camping all over Oregon and the western United States. He had spent time in totally well-marked and safe areas, and he had also spent time hiking around very dangerous and isolated areas where there were cougars and bears and unmarked cliffs everywhere. And so
there is a huge difference here. I don't care how many short stints you've done. To me, a short stint of hiking is like 20 miles. That's a short stint of hiking. And you can do that as many times as you want. And it's not going to make a difference to me that you've done this like 100 times. It's not going to make any difference to me. You're still not in a good way if you're going by yourself. I don't care. I don't care what else you've done. I don't care, because it will not matter. It never does. You can never do something like this by yourself. Never. Always have a team with you. A few people. A few dependable, rugged, tough, armed people. Always. Why do you think almost everybody in the military operates in teams? Almost everybody. Teams and units. Always. Because there's no one person that could do it all themselves. Nobody.
Matt felt like, with his experience in the outdoors,
there's the big kicker. He felt like it.
He was perfectly suited to take on this big of an adventure. And in many ways, that was true. However, something was going to happen to him while he was out on the Pacific Crest Trail that no amount of hiking or camping experience could have prepared him for. So Matt graduated from high school in 2007, and in keeping with his plan, in the spring of 2008, he packed up his stuff, he headed to the airport, and he flew south to Southern California. And when he got there, he made his way all the way south to the border of Mexico. And there he picked up the start of the Pacific Crest Trail. Then he began heading north. For the first few weeks of his hike, Matt would spend the entire day hiking as far as his body would allow him. And then at night, when it got too dark or when he got too tired, he would just set up his campsite right off the edge of the trail. And then after a quick bite to eat, he'd climb inside of his tent and he'd go to sleep. And then the next day, he'd get up early and he'd do it all over again. During those first few weeks, the only real adversity that Matt ever faced, beyond just kind of normal fatigue from long-distance hiking, was at one point he got a little dehydrated, and another time he almost stepped on a rattlesnake. So besides those two things, really the hike had actually been fairly routine by Matt's standards. But when he reached the Lassen National Forest, which is a very dense forest in Northern California, located about 150 miles from the end of his hike, so the border of Oregon, when he got there, this hike of his would become anything but routine. Not long.
Now, never go by yourself. Never go by yourself. Now I'm going to say this much. Lassen is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Every single inch of it is beautiful. Trouble is, there's a lot of weirdos that go out there to escape the law, or that are just crazy people. They go out to like Mount Lassen and try to disappear, or they do disappear, or they don't. They somehow survive and cause trouble for people. Most of them are fairly easily dealt with in a group. Fairly easily. But that really depends on who you're with. Because your average people, most of them just run. Or they try to run and get away. And then they leave stuff. And then you'll find like campsites that are like completely abandoned because people just ran away from some crazy person or an animal or something like that. You go through those areas enough, you'll find plenty of abandoned campsites or just random stuff left in the woods. Like, people, never go by yourself. And if you don't go by yourself, make sure you take people that are tough, dependable, and reliable and are good use in a fight.
Long after stepping foot in Lassen Forest, Matt found himself walking along this winding dirt path where the trees on both sides of this path were pressed tightly up against the edges of this trail. And because of how densely packed the trees were together, it was almost like he had these walls on either side of him that extended 100 feet into the air. And so it was very quiet and it was very dark as he was walking along, but Matt was enjoying it. All he could hear was the chirping of birds and the insects buzzing around him. It was peaceful. And so Matt's just kind of meandering his way through the forest. He's in no rush. And at some point, the trail he was on banked hard to the right. And so he makes this turn, and as he does, he looks up, and what he sees kind of startles him. About 20 feet away from him, off to the right side of the trail, is this big boulder, and sitting on this boulder are two middle-aged people, a man and a woman. They were both dressed head to toe in white. They both looked very dirty and disheveled. The man had this big, unkempt beard, and both of them were just staring daggers at Matt. And so Matt felt awkward, and he immediately looked down as he continued walking towards them. But as he got within a few feet, he looked up and kind of awkwardly smiled at them and waved and said hi, and they didn't respond. They just continued to stare at him with no discernible expression on their face, and they watched him as he walked right past them.
Wild people appeared. Pokemon music starts to play. Sorry. It's just oh man, that's just what popped into my head when I hear of this. That's just what popped into my head. All right, let me read the chat real quick. Brandon Peters says, hey, Brandon. Brandon Peters, a new challenger arrives, a wild challenger. Brandon Peters, poor like button, but maybe you're right, and the like button is bad. Maybe. Brandon Peters again, laugh out loud, Reddit. Yeah, right. The Progressive Cynic, haven't seen you in a minute. At BlastCapBadger, this story is believable and similar things have been reported. Well, yeah, but also you got to take it with a grain of salt because it's an unverified account. Doesn't matter how believable it is. If there's no way to truly verify the story, it's basically 50-50. Brandon Peters, again, even if it's not real, it's definitely going to be interesting. Like a time travel story of U.S. Marines versus the Roman Empire. Listen to. Let's go. Okay. The Progressive Cynic. I have a friend who walked the Appalachian. No spoilers, but this kind of thing happens pretty often. this exact story or like all the different encounters people have on that trail? Because I've had a couple myself, but I had my whole team with me at the same time. So for us, it wasn't a big deal. But for most of your average persons, especially people going solo, it's a huge problem. The progressive cynic, just not this degree. Okay. Brandon Peters all the way down. He's going to do all that on his own? Dang, crazy. Yes, very crazy. Brandon Peters, there's strength in numbers. Those are nice trees. Bob Ross intensifies. Laugh out loud, Pokemon. All right, do me a favor, y'all. Make sure you like the live stream as soon as you get in here. So I actually know there's people watching and I'm not just, flapping my gums to thin air, okay?
And so after Matt walked past these two people in white, he felt really uncomfortable because he knew they were still definitely staring at him as he walked away, and he didn't want to turn around and meet their eye contact. And so he's just kind of walking away, feeling that uncomfortable feeling of someone staring at him, and he's thinking to himself, why didn't they at least wave or acknowledge him in some way? Especially considering the fact that on the Pacific Crest Trail, people go days without seeing other people. Matt, in fact, had not seen another person in days until he saw these two. And so he's thinking, how rude is that to just completely not react when another person walks past you on this trail?
Oh, they reacted. If they're staring at you like that, usually when someone's like just staring you down, that is most certainly some type of malign intent behind it. Always. If someone's just straight up, that's definitely a look of like a predator. Steer clear.
But Matt told himself, you know what? I don't know these people. I don't know what their issues are. For all I know, they're foreign and they didn't understand what I said. And so maybe that's why they didn't say hello back. Who knows? But you know what? It's none of my business. And so Matt just continued walking along. He never turned around to look back at these two people in white. He just carried on. A few hours later, when the sun was starting to set, Matt was still walking along this winding trail with these huge trees on either side of him. And so visibility was getting pretty poor. And so he began looking for a place to make his camp. But because of how close these trees were to the edge of this trail, and considering how dense these trees were, there was no spot for him to make his campsite without completely blocking the trail. And Matt did not want to block the trail for other people. And so what he did is he left the trail and he walked 300 feet or so into these thick trees where he found this little clearing, and that's where he set up his tent. Once it was all set up, he made some food for himself on his little stove, and then after he was done eating, he packaged up all of his leftover food inside of a waterproof bag, and he sealed that up, and then he tied some cord to the bag and threw the bag up and over a branch of a nearby tree and kind of tied it off so the bag was sitting well off the ground. This was to make sure no bears could get to his food. And
the thing that's really getting me is that he's by himself. He is completely by himself. Nobody knows exactly where he's at. Nobody knows what's going on with him. He's by himself. He's unarmed, most likely. And he just encountered a couple of crazy people. He's become prey. That's exactly what's going on here. He has become prey. And he's a willing victim because he's by himself. And also, he's most likely unarmed. Those two factors never bode well in any kind of situation like this.
So after his leftovers were secured high up in a tree, it was totally pitch black outside. And so Matt just climbed into his tent, he zipped it up, climbed into his sleeping bag, and he fell asleep. The next morning, Matt got up right as the sun was starting to rise.
And his food is gone.
It was still pretty dark outside, but there was a little bit of light. And so Matt unzipped his tent and he looked outside, and the first thing he noticed was his bag of food that he had put up in the tree was gone. And so Matt stepped out of his tent and he looked around thinking, maybe it fell to the ground or something.
How did I call it? I must be psychic. No, actually, these crazy people just stole his food, most likely. That's most likely what happened. Look, y'all, you have to keep everything close to you, next to you, and sealed up so it doesn't give off any smell. Or you bury it right next to you under a bunch of dirt, and you keep it in some kind of canvas and like a environment-proof bag with a proper seal. That way, somebody is not going to be able to just walk up and be like, yoink. Not to mention, he's just in a regular tent. Like we took with us our own, like, structurally, basically we put together our own type of camo tents, but basically they just covered our body and our stuff that we had with us, and we made everything appear to look like either a bush or as close to a rock as you can simulate, so that at nighttime, if something is looking at whatever that is, it's going to think it's closer to being a part of nature than anything else. And on top of that, the camouflage breaks up the silhouette. Because with your regular sleeping bag, if you're out in the open and someone's looking at nighttime with just the light from the sky, they'll still be able to tell there's a silhouette there and different types of colors, and it's not a part of nature. So that's something worth trying to pilfer, essentially. Man.
Something, but it wasn't there. It was just gone. And so Matt thought to himself, I didn't hear anything last night, but I guess a bear must have come into the campsite, found the food, and run off with it. And so Matt began walking over to the tree where he had strung the food up to begin looking on the ground for bear prints to confirm his theory that that was who took his food. And so he walks over, he's looking around, he doesn't see any bear prints, but he does see 2 sets of human boot prints, neither of which were his. And before he could even process that, he realized these prints, these human prints, were not just underneath this tree where the food was. These prints, as he looked around him, extended all the way up to his tent and all around his tent and all over his campsite. And so as Matt is looking at this crazy trail of human prints all over the place, he's thinking to himself, how is this possible? I went to bed last night when it was already pitch black outside, and I got up basically right at sunrise, so it was still dark outside. So these 2 people that were walking all over my campsite and cutting my food down, they somehow navigated here 300 feet off the main trail in the middle of nowhere. They navigated here in total pitch blackness, and they did it silently without waking me up. How is that even possible? And so after running through this thought process, Matt realized the only logical conclusion was that the 2 people he saw on the rock, the people in white, had followed him after seeing him. They saw where he left the trail, and they had waited until he fell asleep and then snuck out and robbed him. As Matt's thinking about this, he suddenly realized that maybe they're still around. Maybe he's...
Here's the thing, okay? The most vulnerable state, we all know it, but a few people, people refuse to acknowledge it for whatever reason. The most vulnerable state you're in is when you're asleep. The absolute most vulnerable. That's why you go with a team. Like I said earlier, one of us would stay up, patrol the camp, and then make sure that nothing approached us, and that nothing crawled on anybody else, all them type of stuff. And we do that in cycles. Okay. 4 on, 6 off or whatever. He's got no one to do that for him. Nobody. He's alone. And when you're alone, you're always vulnerable. Always.
Still being watched. And so he began whipping his head around, looking in all directions, almost expecting to see the man and the woman in white kind of poking out from behind a tree. But when he looked around, he couldn't see anyone. However, he started to get that sense that he was being watched. And so, feeling really uncomfortable, he quickly packed up his campsite and walked as quickly and calmly as he could toward the trail. And as he walked, he kept thinking to himself that these people are going to jump out from behind a tree, or they're going to grab me from behind. And so he's walking faster and faster and faster. And he finally gets to the trail, and he looks down the trail and up the trail. He kind of looks all around. He doesn't see anybody. And so he tells himself, okay, they're gone. So he took a deep breath, he composed himself, and he started walking north again along the trail. Matt walked for several hours, periodically looking over his shoulder, again expecting to see the man and woman in white, but he never did. And eventually, this narrow path, kind of cutting through the dense forest, opened up to this big, beautiful field. And by that point, the sun was high in the sky. And so Matt's walking in this very beautiful open area. He can see in all directions. There's sunlight beaming down on him. And so even though he was totally rattled by what had happened the night before, he found himself kind of becoming more at ease about the situation. He was far less paranoid, and he began telling himself, as creepy as it is that those people in white almost certainly followed him and snuck up on his campsite in the middle of the night, as bad as that is, he thought, you know what? They probably were just super hungry, and they clearly needed the food more than he did. And so, you know what? Those people, they can have my food, whatever.
And now he's going to get complacent again. He's going to drop his guard. Not to mention, he's acting like prey. To these people, they're crazy. They're crazy people. They are. And you're acting like prey? Okay. Now you're hunted. Now you are prey. Bub. Frustration level over 9,000.
So Matt just continued on, telling himself he would never have to deal with the people in white ever again. However, he would be wrong. Over the next 3 days, Matt continued making his way north through the Lassen forest, and the trail he was on would weave between those big, beautiful open areas back inside those very densely forested areas where the trees were practically right on top of you. And during those 3 days, Matt did not see the people in white. He did not have any nighttime encounters with anybody. Nothing got stolen. And so that only reinforced the idea that, he had been a target of opportunity. They had taken what they wanted from him, and they were no longer following him.
So he's unarmed, he's alone. People have taken stuff from him already, and they know he's alone. And he acted like prey on top of that. So I'll tell you this much. When myself and my team did this same trail, not exactly the same probably. We probably deviated a little bit just for giggles and kicks. But all of us were armed. All of us were armed. We all had something that we carried. And we had multiple different armaments. Now, okay. Technically, in California, that's a no-no, right? But as long as you have it concealed and you don't have it, displayed, no one's going to bother you. Okay? Nobody. And technically in national parks, for most people, I don't know if it's still a thing, but for most people, unless you have like a license of some kind, okay, or you're hunting, you're not allowed to carry a weapon in California. And California makes up the majority of the trail. And it was a similar deal in Oregon and Washington. They also had pretty strict gun laws. So I guarantee you this dude didn't have any weapon. So he has no way to defend himself. 2-on-1 when you're alone? You might as well fight a bear barehanded. Just saying.
But on the fourth day after the food stealing incident, things would get spooky for Matt again. On that fourth night, Matt was once again forced to leave the trail he was on. He was in one of those very densely forested areas and walk well off the trail to find a clearing for his tent. And so he walked, several hundred feet away. He finds this clearing. He sets up his tent. And then also he sets up a perimeter of sticks all around the outside of his campsite. This was a precaution he had begun taking after the food stealing incident. These sticks were an early warning system where if any animal or person came too close to his campsite, they would step, in theory, on these sticks and they would break and they would alert Matt in the middle.
Not if someone is very well versed in moving with any type of stealth. If we had footage of myself and my team moving through these we always stayed a bit off the trail, and that's on purpose. That's on purpose because then there's less of a likelihood of an ambush of any kind from crazy people, because the trails are well known, and I guarantee you it's been seen by anyone living in the woods that plenty of people frequent these trails. So we go a little bit off trail. Okay. But we are deliberately stepping the whole time. We try to make the minimal amount of noise, and even light sticks, if you're making deliberate steps, you watch your footing, you're looking around, you're doing the search. Okay. You can move through those woods and make barely a sound. Someone could be within 5 feet of you and not even hear that you're there. And I guarantee you, these people are pretty well versed in that.
Middle of the night. And so after his campsite was all set up and all prepared, Matt sat down and had a quick bite to eat. And then after storing his food, he climbed inside of his tent and he fell asleep. Before we finish the story, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, HelloFresh. Are you tired of surprise gifts? Okay, back to the story. A few hours later, Matt suddenly woke up. Now, when he woke up, he opened his eyes, but it's pitch black in his tent. There are no windows in his tent, and it's pitch black outside. So even with his eyes open, he can't see anything. And so he's just laying there with his eyes open, but it's total darkness, and he's just listening intently because he doesn't really know why he woke up, if something startled him, or if there's no reason at all. And so he's just laying there and he's listening, and as he's listening, he hears the distinct sound of something stepping on one of these sticks in his perimeter. And so he hears the stick break and his heart just starts racing because he knows that an animal or a person is just a few feet away from him.
Okay, so I was wrong. It kind of worked out for him, but how much is that going to help? Sure, it gives him an early warning, but what's he going to do after the early warning? What is your plan, dude? What are you going to do? What can you do? Run?
And so instinctively, he kind of begins to pull his arm as quietly as he can out of his sleeping bag, and he reaches over and he grabs his hunting knife. And as he grabs the handle...
Okay, so he's got a close quarters weapon, and that's it. Well, I guess at least he's armed, and that's something, I guess. I guess that's something. But is he trained with it? My man, have you been trained on how to utilize the weapon you have? Is it a long blade, a short blade? What type of blade is it? Is it a utility knife? Is it a hunting knife? What is it? He said a hunting knife, right? A lot of hunting knives are not made as something you can use very effectively on like, you know, anything but like stripping game or cutting rope or something like that. Not a lot of them are made that way. So like, even if you do have this blade, do you know how to use it? This is stuff people don't think about. One blade is not as good as another. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that. My C-bar, my blade of choice, is a solid handle. It's a one piece, and I can resharpen it as much as I want. Not to mention, I'm trained on it. I'm trained on it. So if that's the last thing I have to use, I know I can be very effective with it. But this dude probably doesn't have that. And that makes this even worse because he's untrained with a blade. Now that's a potential weapon that might slip out of your hand. Now it's something that can be used against you. What then? Bub.
Of the knife and he brings it closer to him, he hears the sound of more footsteps. Whatever has stepped on the stick has not slowed down at all. They don't care about the sound they just made. They're still moving towards his tent. And so Matt's starting to get really freaked out because he knows that, you know, it could be an animal, but just a couple of days ago, 2 people were in his campsite stealing his food and walking all around his tent. And so that's what's going through his head. And so Matt's laying there preparing himself to potentially have to slash out if anybody came close to his tent. I mean, he's in the middle of nowhere. If a person is out here, it's not his friend. And so he's laying there, he's kind of shaking, and he's listening really intently. And the footsteps are just getting closer and closer and closer to his tent until they stop right next to his head. They are literally about a foot away from him. And so he can't see anything. He's just listening really intently. And then he starts to hear whispering. But the whispering is not coming from this person right here. The whispering is coming from everywhere in the forest. It's coming from all different directions. And so Matt doesn't know what to think about this. And as he's hearing this whispering, which is getting more and more frantic, whoever is standing right outside of his tent begins circling his tent. So now he hears footsteps just walking in a circle around his tent while frantic whispers are coming in from all directions. And so at this point, Matt is so terrified, he's just frozen. He knows that he's holding that knife, but he won't be able to do anything with it. He's just...
Okay, so now it looks like there's more than 2. Sounds like a cult. Sounds like a cult of some kind. They're doing weird whispering stuff. And they're just walking around the tent. Sounds like a cult. Sounds like a cult. Seriously. All right. Let me read the chat. Trithemius Finnegan. Sounds like a cult. That's what I said. Trithemius Finnegan. Appalachian Trail is known for having feral humans living out in the deep woods. Yeah. That's what I hear. Brandon Peters. I don't care what the law says. I'm definitely bringing a gun. Probably a rifle and a pistol with 5 mags each at least. Yep. Brandon Peters. A hunting knife, bro? That's it? Wow. Not even a pistol. You know what I just thought of? Actually, you know what? I stick by it. I stick by it. Because if that's all you've got, that's all you've got, man. That's all you've got. And you've put yourself in this situation. But the thing is, he shouldn't even be there in the first place. Bub. The progressive cynic at BlastCapBadger. Even with training, a knife versus an unknown number of hostiles with unknown weapons on their home terrain, it's pretty awful odds. Yes, it is. I wouldn't take that, and I have years of training. You and I both. You and I both. But my point is that if that's all I had, I know I can be effective with it. But if I'm down to that blade and that's it, that's all I've got left, then essentially at that point, I know for a fact this is the end. This is the end. and I'm just going to try to go out with a pile of bodies around me if I can. But for him, he's still basically doomed. However, he put himself in this situation. So it's unfortunate, but he made this decision to put himself here, no matter what else is going on. So yeah, you and I both would not take these odds, though. Never. Brandon Peters. Oh, great. Lots of whispers. Yep. Sounds like a cult. Brandon Peters. A knife is better than nothing, I guess, but not as good as a firearm. Not at all. Not at all. You know, anytime you could deal damage at range, that makes you a much more effective combatant. Much more effective.
Petrified. And then as soon as this total nightmare had begun, it just stopped. The whispering, silence. The footsteps stopped. And so in a way, it was kind of relieving, but in another way, Matt's laying there thinking, I want to hear the sound of footsteps retreating into the forest, leaving, but I haven't heard that. It went from footsteps all around the tent and whispering everywhere to silence, as if whoever is out there is still out there. And they're just standing there waiting for him. And because it's so dark, he can't even look. He can't look outside and see. And so he's left just laying in his tent, wondering if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people are just waiting outside of his tent. He's got no idea. And so finally, the sun would come up in the morning. And again, Matt has not heard the sound of retreating footsteps. And so maybe they're still just standing outside. But once the sun had totally come up and there was some light outside that he could see through his tent, Matt decided he just had to check. And so he reached over and he quickly unzipped the flap of the tent and he looked outside. He didn't see anyone. He leapt outside with his knife, ready to confront anyone who was out there, but there was no one. And so Matt, he's not thinking, oh, great, they're gone. He's thinking, are they just like a few feet away, hiding behind trees? And so for a few minutes, Matt just began looking all around his campsite, kind of expecting to see, those people in white or other people he doesn't know, but he doesn't see anyone. And then Matt starts thinking to himself, was this just a nightmare? Did that not even happen? Am I imagining this? But when he looked down, he saw clear footprints all over his campsite, including a nice track all the way around his tent. And so this nightmare really had played out in real life. And so he quickly gets everything back into his pack, he throws it on his shoulder, and he just starts running back towards the trail. And when he got to the trail, he continued running north. And as he's running along and looking over his shoulder the whole time, he's telling himself, I just need to get out of Lassen National Forest. I need to get out of the people in white's turf, get away from this place, and I'll be left alone. And so that motivated him to spend the whole day moving as fast as he possibly could. And by that afternoon, he had finally escaped Lassen National Forest. He was out, and he was in one of these smaller towns that kind of butted up alongside this forest.
Bub, you haven't escaped. You've been marked. You've been marked as prey. Now they're after you. They are in pursuit. And they're going to find you. Maybe I should start some kind of survival series or something. The do's and don't do's, okay, of freaking going out into nature at all. But how many people are actually going to listen? Not a lot. People are pretty lazy on average. We will seek comfort above all else. That's just what we do. So even if I do that, how many people are actually going to pay attention? Not a lot. Not many. And it's unfortunate because stuff like this will just keep on happening.
So that night, he camped out right near this town. He wanted to be as close to civilization as possible to ensure his safety. And so as he's laying in his tent that night, he began thinking about what had happened over the past couple of days. At this point, he was nearly certain that the people in white that he had seen on that boulder, they had to be behind these nighttime encounters. They just had to be. And so he's thinking to himself, okay, well, the first encounter I had with them, when they stole his food, yeah, that's creepy, but it makes sense. They followed him, they went to his campsite, they stole his food. Okay, fine. That makes sense to him. But the second encounter, the one that had happened the night before, that didn't make any sense. Assuming it was, again, the people in white responsible, that meant they had been following Matt the whole time, and he had not seen them somehow, even though over the last couple of days, he had been looking over his shoulder constantly, looking for those people, but he didn't see them, and they still managed to follow him all the way over several days to this other unmarked campsite, hundreds of feet off the main trail. So how did they do that? And then two, once they were at his campsite and he's laying there listening to them, walking around the campsite, whispering to each other, what were they doing? And then how did the footsteps and whispering just stop immediately? And he didn't even hear the sound of them retreating into the woods.
This kind of stuff, look, y'all, it frustrates me to no freaking end. To no freaking end. Okay? People being damn fools, it will always piss me off. Always, without fail. Now, I may seem like I come across as like stoic and I just don't care about other people, but I do. I do. Especially when I know more could have been done. Don't go by yourself into the freaking wilderness. Ever. And don't go unarmed. Man, people drive me nuts.
How did they do that? And so Matt would go over this and over this until finally he would fall asleep. And then the next morning when he got up, it was the first thing he was thinking about. The people in white. What were they doing and why and where were they? And so as Matt packed up his campsite that morning, it did cross his mind, that maybe he should just stop the hike right now and call his family, have them come pick him up and get out of here. But this hike, this huge hike he had planned, was really important to him. And he was only about 100 miles away from the finish line, which meant he had already hiked over 1,600 miles. And he just didn't want to quit. He wanted to finish what he started. And so he packed up his stuff, he threw it over his shoulder, and he continued on. And so that day, Matt would leave that little town, and he would make his way up into another very dense forest called the Mount Shasta forest. Mount Shasta was a lot like the Lassen forest, except Mount Shasta has a very disturbing backstory. Specifically, lots and lots of people go missing inside of Mount Shasta, and often they go missing under baffling circumstances. The most frightening of these missing persons reports are when someone comes back, the survivor of the event, and they will say, they saw their hiking companion. They clearly saw them. And then they turned their back on them just for a few moments, few minutes, whatever it was. And when they turned back around, the person they were with was now gone. No trace of them, nothing. They're just gone. And despite a massive search for them, they're never found again. There is a distressing number of missing people in Mount Shasta that sound just like that. It's totally terrifying. So with that in mind.
So if you'll want to know more about these types of cases of people going missing in national parks, look up the 411, the missing 411. Look up missing 411, or look up David Paulides. Now, whether he's real or fake, whether he's good or bad, okay, all of the stuff David Paulides has compiled is still useful because it tells you that there's a real huge danger to going to national parks here in the U.S. There is. People go missing all the time for no seen reason. People just seem to disappear. And some people reappear with no idea how they came back. Okay? So that's a major unknown element. When we do any type any type of operations in the military, every unknown factor is considered a lethal threat. And we try to plan accordingly for that. So should everybody else. So should everybody else.
Matt makes his way into the Mount Shasta forest, and even though it totally stressed him out to once again be walking on these dirt pathways where the trees are very tight on either side of you, they're very dense, and as he's walking, he's kind of looking in both directions, expecting to see somebody watching him. Despite feeling that way, Matt just continued to stay focused and kept telling himself to just continue on, because you're so close to the end. And so the first 3 days that he was in the Mount Shasta forest, Matt would just keep his head down and very stoically every day he would just hike as far as he possibly could. In the evening, he would set up his campsite either right off the trail or maybe a little ways off the trail in a clearing. And he didn't have any run-ins with the people in white or anyone.
Let me go back a little bit. You see these tents, these types of tents? Foolish. Absolutely foolish. Because they stand out so hard. They stand out so hard. Okay, even in pitch dark. Okay, the darkest you could find in a national park, and I've been in many of them. And I've even been in places where, like, you know, you could barely see your hand in front of your face. If you have tents like these, I'm going to find it. I only have to be within like a little distance. And when you're looking in the dark and you don't have nods or some type of thermal imaging device or anything like that, or light, what you do is that you look around whatever it is you're trying to see at nighttime. And you can make out silhouettes by doing that. So let's say my finger's right here and it's an object in the dark. I'm not going to look directly at it. I'm going to look around it. And when I look around it, I can guess, I can see the silhouette of whatever it is I'm trying to look at. If you have something like this in the middle of the woods, I will find it. I will find it. And I don't even have the best vision out of everybody I've ever known. So I guarantee you, these type of people that are out in the woods, they're going to find it too. Even in the darkness, the darkest nights. And another thing, when it comes to like tracking, and when it comes to like, you know, a stalk, if you're following somebody, if you're out in the wilderness and you know how to blend in and you know how to track, you could be like 300 meters away from somebody and you could be wearing bright freaking pink. But if you don't know how to look, if you don't know how to scan, and you're not trained for that, you'll still miss somebody 300 meters away in the woods. These people are wearing white, but they're still stalking him. That means he is unable to spot them. And even if they're doing the bare minimum to take advantage of cover and concealment, he's not going to find them. And it's not that hard. Look, if you want to snatch somebody up, it's really not that difficult, especially with the kind of training and equipment we got. If we wanted to, okay, there could be a group of people going down a trail and we will snatch one of them right out from behind the group. And the group's going to keep carrying on because they're not going to hear a sound. By the time we get our hands on them, it's too late. And then everybody else will just keep moseying away. And then we get our quarry, gag them, bag them, head the opposite direction. They'll never find them. And it's not too hard to imagine that there's people that know how to do this because they've done it several times. And they're not even trained. But this dude is in a bad situation from the get-go. He's by himself. He doesn't have any type of training. None of the right equipment, apparently. And again, he's by himself. And even worse, he's unarmed. Man.
And he didn't have any run-ins with the people in white or anybody else for that matter. He was totally left alone. But on his fourth day in the Mount Shasta forest, all that would change. On that fourth day, Matt found himself not inside one of those very dense forested areas, but rather in this very open trail that was up on the side of this mountain. And because this trail was fairly high up in elevation, the tree coverage was fairly sparse. And so there was great visibility. He could see miles ahead of him. And when he turned around, he could see miles behind him. And so Matt is just walking along this trail, kind of enjoying the day. It's beautiful outside. And at some point, he turns around and looks behind him. Now, all day he'd been doing that, and he had not seen anyone. But this time, when he turned around, he saw two little white dots, miles and miles back, slowly making their way along the trail that he was on. It was the people in white. They were back. At this point, Matt was at least 50 miles or more away from that first place he had walked past the people in white when they were sitting on that boulder, which meant, one, Matt was right. These people in white really had followed him and almost certainly were responsible for the nighttime visits he was getting. And two, for reasons unknown, they were still following him. Matt suddenly didn't care at all about completing his big hike. He just wanted to get the heck away from those people. And so very quickly, he pulled out his map and he looked, and to his horror, he realized he was in one of the most isolated portions of the entire hike. He was at least 25 miles away from the nearest civilization, a little town called Castella, California.
25 miles is nothing. It's nothing. Even over horrible terrain. Shoot. Like the average time to do 12 miles for us would be like 2 hours and like 40 minutes. And that's for us with all of our gear. So we weigh like, all combined with our gear and everything, our bag, our food, supplies, ammo, weapons, emergency supplies, altogether we weighed about 500 pounds. And we're still going to make 12 miles in like close to 2.5 hours. So, bub, keep on stepping. Keep on stepping. Head straight to that place. Don't stop. Don't camp. Keep going. Just keep going. Okay? You can make 25 miles in a morning. I've done it multiple times. You can make 25 miles in a morning. And he's probably carrying a lot less than we were. So, bub, make it. You got the will. There is a way. You can do it. So get to stepping.
And so without a better option, Matt put the map back in his pocket. He took one last look at the people in white who were making steady gains on him. And then Matt just turned away from them and began booking it down the trail. And Matt would run.
Don't book it. Don't book it. Okay? You'll only overexhaust yourself. Pick a good, steady, like fast walking pace. Stick to it as much as you can. And just keep on moving. Keep on moving. You'll make it. You just got to not be in your head.
For hours and hours and hours without stopping. Even when he turned around and could no longer see the people in white, he just kept on running. And then when the sun set and he could barely see the trail, he just kept on running. It literally wasn't until it was so dark outside that he actually couldn't see the ground anymore that Matt finally, totally exhausted, came to a stop. And then from there, he turned and left the trail and walked way away from the trail, hundreds of feet deep into the forest, to get as far away from these people in white as he possibly could. And so finally, he found this clearing very far away from the trail. He set up his tent right in the middle of it, and then he very diligently laid out his perimeter of sticks around his campsite, making sure there were no gaps. And then he climbed inside of his tent, he zipped it up, and then keeping on all of his stuff in case he needed to make a run for it, he got inside of his sleeping bag, and he just laid there with no expectation that he was going to sleep.
So even though he ran for hours and hours and hours, trouble is, he probably paused at some point, took a breath, then started running again. And also, he's leaving a much easier trail to follow. Much easier. When somebody's running, you're digging into the earth, you're creating a deeper print, you're creating a larger disturbance in the area where your footfalls are. So it's a much easier trail to follow now. And now he's completely and totally worn. Whereas if he kept on stepping like just a little faster and kept that pace up, he'd probably be able to keep going. Probably. But unfortunately, he's basically made himself much more vulnerable. All right, now let me read the chat real quick. Brandon Peters, the sunk cost fallacy. Progressive cynic twice at BlastCapBadger. I personally don't go in for any of the supernatural alien conspiracies. That said, it's undeniable that a trail-wise serial killer would be a nightmare in those parks. You damn Skippy. And making somebody disappear silently while close to others isn't exactly hard if you have the right training and equipment. Actually, truthfully, all you need is really the right training. You don't even need the proper equipment. You just need the right training. And I would know. I've done it. I have done it. And Progressive Cynic, I'm guessing you probably have too. Brandon Peters. Well, I saw a video of the guy clad in 1800s British Army gear, and he easily hid from sight despite being real close to the camera. Exactly. Progressive Cynic. The kid clearly doesn't know how ancient humans hunted. They would scare prey until it ran, run to exhaustion, and just track it at a steady pace. We are endurance predators, not ambush or chase. Indeed. Indeed. However, we do have the capacity. Our physiques are very adaptable. That's another advantage we have over most animals in nature. Most animals in nature do not have a very adaptable physique. They're built one way and that's it. Whereas if we want to be able to go long distances without stopping, we can. If we want to go pretty fast for long distances, we can. We just have to train ourselves to do so. We have that ability. Most animals in nature don't. They're built one way and that's all. Brandon Peters, I can do a mile in 10 minutes if I walk. If I run, it's more like 8 to 5 minutes. Although it might be half a mile. I could do 25 miles, especially if I walk, which is what I would do. Yes. Yes. What was his name? There was a Continental Army general at the Battle of Bunker Hill who led reinforcements to Bunker Hill, but he led them under fire at a walking pace. And when he was asked why he did that, he said to the person that asked the question, he said, "One well-rested man is worth 10 exhausted men in battle." And that's pretty much accurate. All right, let's go.
He was terrified. As he laid there, he thought to himself, okay, I have now run at least several miles ahead of them. I know that was them. I know I got some distance on them. There's no way they saw where I turned off the trail and where I've set up this campsite. So they can't possibly find me. And so Matt would lay in the tent for several hours just waiting to fall asleep. And then finally he would start to get tired because at this point it's totally quiet outside. He hasn't heard anything. And so he begins to doze off to sleep. And as he's getting more and more tired, he hears the sound of someone stepping on his perimeter of sticks. And as soon as he hears that stick break, he hears the all too familiar whispering pick up all around the forest. And then something new happens. Before Matt can even do anything, his tent lights up like a Christmas tree. Someone is shining a light on his tent. Someone has snuck up on his campsite in the middle of nowhere, hundreds and hundreds of feet off the trail, in the middle of the night. They found him. And they're shining a light on him. And then the light clicks off and it's silent. And at this point, Matt's fight or flight instinct kicks in and he rips off his sleeping bag. He jumps outside and begins screaming nonsense and flailing around with a knife, trying to intimidate these people to get away from him. And then after he stops for a second, he hears a stick crunch right behind him. And he whips his head around to look at who is standing right behind him.
Give me a sec, folks. My lighting situation is terrible. Absolutely terrible. So give me a sec. How am I going to do this? Alley-oop. Okay, that should be better. Let's continue.
And as he's turning out of his peripheral vision, he sees a dark figure running towards him. He doesn't think twice. He just turns and begins running away from the campsite. Now remember, it's pitch black in the forest. There's trees everywhere. And so Matt's smashing into trees. Branches are hitting him. He's falling to the ground. But he is on a pure adrenaline high. And he is just sprinting as fast as he possibly can away from this person who is likely still chasing him.
If you're running in a panic, and believe me, I would know. I've done this. Yes, I've done that. There was one point in time where I was forcibly separated from my team. And I was much, much younger at this point in time. And I was pretty new still. And with all of my training, with all of my weapons and equipment, I got forcibly separated from my team. And it was not too dissimilar from this, except it was much darker outside. Or probably around the same time, probably. I don't know. And I tried running away in a panic because I didn't know where my team ended up. I didn't even know if they were still alive. I couldn't get comms with them anymore. And I was trying to disengage from the enemy. And I was trying to just get away. I still had to stop every once in a while to try and to deter the enemy from, following too closely. And I ended up, I was kind of panicked. Without my team, I'm just myself. No matter how tough, determined, well-armed, and well-trained I am, I'm just myself. And I ran off as fast as I could. I wasn't able to find my team because we were in a bad spot. And I ended up blundering my way straight off the side of a mountain. And I made it quite far. And thankfully, there was like a cutoff that I fell down into. And I think that's what saved me, because they couldn't see me from the top of the mountain. At least not anymore. But it hurt. It hurt a lot. And getting up was tough. I had to wait a few hours to make sure nobody had come down to try to get to me. But I think they gave up after a few hours. But I found out that I had tore some muscle in my right leg, and I had broken a couple of ribs, and one of my wrists was fractured because of that fall, because I ran away in a panic and I wasn't paying attention. And just those few hours of trying to circle back to where I thought my team was agonizing hell. I was in a lot of pain. I was barely walking as fast as like an old man. And because of that rookie mistake, it cost me quite a bit of time, actually, because my team had almost completely missed me. Thank the heavens that not too far away, some cast just showed up. They weren't even ours. They were not any assets of ours. They just showed up, and the Hakane Network guys that were in the area pursuing us, they took off after they saw Cass coming. They thought we called it in, but Cass had no idea we were there. It was actually Cass that was attached to another unit in the same AO. That was what saved us. And my team cloverleafed quite a distance towards where they thought I went, and I was heading in a perpendicular line back to where I thought they went, and they found me. But man, if I had stayed and my team had completely missed me and had to come back to do another search, it would have taken me a very long time to get to the next closest cob. And I was messed up. I was badly hurt. And if the enemy had found me, that would have been a really short engagement, because I was barely able to move. So yeah, running in a panic is never good, no matter what it is. Just don't panic. Just don't. Take a breath, do the 5 C's, calm, cool, collected, clear, and concise. Do the 5 C's. Get that steady breath in you. Calm down the adrenaline, but maintain a forward momentum. And that will greatly increase your chances of survival. Okay, let me look at the chat. Brandon Peters. I'd carry a large stick with me when I went to work at my neighbor's place, easily 4 feet long and 3 feet thick on one end. Basically a big club. Also, the neighbor's dog would walk me home. There you go. Brandon Peters. Panic is man's worst enemy in a disaster. Man, almost RIP Badger. Yeah, almost. One of many, many close calls. Great. Let me just run off this mountain so I don't get shot. Yeah, pretty much at that point. Brandon Peters. The air lads. Woo, lucky you. Yeah, incredibly lucky. Incredibly lucky. I sought them out, not too long after that mission, because we ended up going on R&R at the same time and in the same place, luckily. So I bought them drinks for that one. Brandon Peters, clover-leafed. It's essentially where you pick an area and you do like a clover leaf search pattern. And then you reverse it and you clover leaf further out. And it's a type of search pattern we use. Brandon Peters. I remember breaking my arm when I was 6. Let me tell you, it hurt, and I had to be dragged to assistance. Bub, that was not a good time. That was not a good time. Oh, man, I'm getting sympathy pains now. I hated that. I hated that so bad. All right, let's continue with the video.
And after 5 minutes of running, he stumbles and falls forward and kind of lands at the base of this fallen tree. The tree had landed in such a way that it was kind of propped on a rock. So there was a small gap underneath the tree. And so Matt, thinking quickly, kind of slid himself underneath this log and positioned himself so he was looking back in the direction he was running from. And as he laid there, he saw in the distance this light bobbing around. These people are looking for him. They're searching the forest for him. And so he watched in horror, tucked underneath this log, as whoever had the light and whoever else was...
Give me a sec.
With them, they moved closer and closer and closer, but they did not find him tucked underneath the log. They just walked right on past him. And so Matt...
Good on you, dude. Good on you. Taking advantage of the natural flora, you know, he found what we call concealment. And a log can kind of be covered depending on what it is you're up against. Although if it's 50 caliber, if it's like 12.7 millimeter or above, or 50 cal, it's not cover anymore. It's just not cover anymore. I don't care how thick the tree is. You better have like a sequoia or a redwood in between you and a 50 cal. Otherwise, it's not going to do much for you. But he found concealment. Okay, he found concealment. That's good. That's really good. He did something that will help him survive at least a little bit longer.
Would remain underneath this log all night until finally the sun came up. And at that point, even though it was fairly obvious that whoever was looking for him, they were now gone, Matt was still terrified. And so he stayed under the log for several hours until it was about early afternoon. And then he finally pulled himself out from under the log and he looked around. He couldn't see anyone. And then instead of going back to his campsite and getting his gear, he just totally abandoned it. He was worried that these people in white or whoever it was, that they were still going to be there. And so he just turned and continued running away from his campsite back out to the trail. And once he got the trail, he continued running on the trail all the way to Castella, California. And when he got there, he hitchhiked his way to the town of Mount Shasta. And there he would speak to police as well as the Forestry Service about what he had experienced. And so they would take all of his information down and they would put him up in a motel for the night. And then the next day, Matt would get in touch with his family and they would drive from Oregon to Mount Shasta. They would pick him up and they would take him back home. Months later, Matt would contact the Mount Shasta Police and the Forest Service and would just follow up and say, hey, have you learned anything else about these people in white? Have you caught them? Has anybody else come forward? And the police would say, you know, they did have a number of people coming forward saying that things had been stolen from their campsites. These are people that were in Mount Shasta, in Lassen Forest, and the surrounding forests. But Matt was the only one who had reported being terrorized by this mysterious couple in white. And so to this day, Matt has no idea who those two people were, what they wanted with him, beyond obviously the food they took. I mean, they continued to stalk him for nearly 100 miles. And he has no idea how they were able to keep finding his campsites that were hundreds of feet off the main trail in unmarked areas that they would somehow navigate to in total darkness without alerting Matt. It's all a big mystery. So that's going to...
All right, there you have it, folks. Feral people hunt teen hiker. All right, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Let's have a little chat-see. But yeah, that's a wild story, but it's not too dissimilar from similar things I've heard of and encountered myself when we did that trail. Here's my biggest thing, though, is that there's a very lackluster response from local authorities, from local law enforcement. And this is one of the reasons why I am all for militarization of law enforcement. I'm all for it. The training, the gear, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, I'm all for it. Okay. I want law enforcement, okay, to be as bad as possible. As bad as possible. You know why? Because if it was us, okay, if it was myself and my team and we had like a micro station somewhere off the trail and people came to us and reported this strange activity to us, okay, boys, it's time to go hunting. Okay. We do randomized patrols, randomized patterns up and down the trail. We would station personnel at certain points along the trail within basically spitting distance of each other. And we would find these people. We'd hunt them down and we'd either bag them and tag them, or depending on how their reaction would be, we would end up taking out the threat. That's what we'd end up doing. Okay. But there's such a lackluster just performance record when it comes to local law enforcement. So lackluster, it's stupendously ridiculous. Stupendously. So that's why I'm in favor of militarization of law enforcement. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Not this pansied version of what we call police and sheriffs and rangers and stuff. They're absolutely pansied. They are. They're soft. And they're not very useful. There's very few success stories when it comes to law enforcement of any kind. Why do you think that is? Well, that's because we've reduced them down to basically just people with a badge and a gun, and that's it. That's all. Or hell, you know what? Fine. Okay, you don't want to militarize police? You don't want to militarize police? Fine then. Outsource to your local military. Outsource to your National Guard. Okay. You know, like let them make it a training mission type of thing. Okay. We're in pursuit of strange people. So each company is going to get a different AO, you know, within like, you know, 80 miles of each other and stuff, and start a search pattern. Movement to contact. Something like, come on. But no, nobody wants to have that conversation, it seems. Whatever. All right, let's see. Excuse me. The progressive cynic. It's not the people who reported being stalked to the police that we should worry about. It's the possibility there were some who didn't have that chance. Exactly. However, that could be prevented. That could be hugely reduced if we did things properly. Brandon Peters, I'd love to hear more of your insane military life. Well, you're going to get plenty of chances for a while at least. It's not very cost effective to keep doing this. I hate to tell y'all, but it's not. It's really not. It's not cost effective at all. In fact, it's a huge question how I'm going to keep on doing this, because I enjoy it, but I'm not getting anything from it to make sure I can keep on doing this because I enjoy it. So we'll see how that goes. Brandon Peters, the police should flood the forest with troopers and hunt them down. Don't flood the forest. Don't flood the forest. You know, get those people that made these reports to go out with you so they could bring you to the exact spot. Then you can do a search pattern from there. And that will greatly narrow down, hugely narrow down the search area you have to conduct the search in. Brandon Peters, the National Guard would smoke them out, a couple thousand guys in vehicles. Yeah, especially if it was like especially if they treated it like a campaign. Okay. A campaign is where you're going through certain areas. You have units all spread out, and your campaign is to move to a certain objective with the entire unit. So you're covering a huge area, and it'll be hard for someone to slip through that, especially since they're military personnel. The progressive cynic, if they wanted to kill him, he'd be dead given the chances they had. I would bet it was a chase off where they freak him out until he abandons his gear, which they can steal. Possibly. Brandon Peters, laugh out loud. Me and Badger are on the same wavelength. Quite a few times, yeah. Unlucky Meteor. Dude, we need weekly training for officers, especially the forest rangers. Those people are off-road. They need upgrades. Yes. Unlucky Meteor. We need more military involved in police and forest ranger training. There should be a petition or movement for that. Brandon Peters. Be very, very quiet. We're hunting crazy people. Pretty much. The progressive cynic and Unlucky Meteor. And a ton of that needs to be hand-to-hand. I've done BJJ for 15 years, and the stupid, embarrassing BS you see some officers use is just sad. Yes, it is. If you want to pick up a martial art, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, especially like Hoist Gracie or any of their type of related camps. Jiu-jitsu is very incredibly effective for almost everything. So yeah, me, I've got a blend of like Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, boxing, and some certain techniques we use in the military that are for actual combat, for fighting someone who knows how to fight back. And that will give you a leg up over people who don't know how to fight but try to fight anyway. It'll always give you a leg up in that regard. Brandon Peters, MMA maybe. Yeah, at least like, you know, make an MMA camp for law enforcement and all them guys. You know. Although Tim, Tim Kennedy, I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with him. Former MMA fighter. Last time I talked to him, he was in the one of the lower. He was in, I'm trying to remember which group he was specifically part of, but he was in group last time I talked to him. I think he still is. Though he might have gone active duty. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've, engaged with him. So yeah, Tim Kennedy actually is doing what's called the Sheepdogs course. And it's basically for like anybody, but he invites local law enforcement. He invites all sorts of agency, alphabet soup people to go there. Yeah. Unlucky Meteor at Progressive Cynic. I fought on the streets, wrestled with friends and family, did karate, trained with trainers of military and police backgrounds. I did MMA at a gym, almost scored a contract for UFC when I was in my early 20s, but I broke some ribs in a preliminary. Yeah, that'll do it. Brandon Peters, I took some karate when I was younger. Well, take up some kind of training now. You should always be training as much as you can. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's like, a few hours a week or every single day. Keep up some kind of consistent training regimen. Okay? So yeah, what do y'all think about the militarization of law enforcement? I'm all for it. I really am. Unlucky Meteor. It just amazes me that police do not have the hand-to-hand combat training that I have from a hobby as a young man. Well, it should be a mandatory thing, but it's not. It should be compulsory. If you choose to do any type of service, it should be compulsory that you're going to be trained and make it through that training to provide the best damn service you can. Brandon Peters, I don't know. Militarizing police could have consequences. Brandon, get yourself out of that mode of thinking. There's consequences to everything. You have to pick and choose which consequences you're good with. Everything has a result. Everything has an end goal. Everything has some kind of consequence to it. Everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It does not matter. But you have to pick and choose what consequences you're good with. That's how reality operates, my man. If you choose to go into the medical field and you don't get like a grant or a scholarship that rides you all the way through, you're going to get footed with a bill of hundreds of thousands just for your education, and you got to pay it back. That's the consequences of becoming that. Okay? If you become a soldier, like I did, and you dedicate your life to combat arms, it's going to tear apart your body. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get injured. And in the long term, you're going to be in a lot of pain. But that is the consequences of doing it. Okay? You want to be a martial artist. You want to be a fighter. Okay? Even if you make it, okay, you're going to get knocked out. You're going to lose teeth. You're going to have your nose broken. You're going to have an eye socket bopped out. You're going to have your ears like cauliflowered. You're going to break ribs, arms. You know, even just training will grind away at your joints and your bones. You can get injured just training. But that's the consequences of that. You chose to do a thing. There's consequences for all of it. Just leave the door open. So yeah, everything has a consequence. All of it. You have to pick and choose what consequences you're good with. That's all. That's how reality operates. Okay. Real awesome guy. I'm not able to chat on your Twitch because I can't verify my number. That sucks, man. That sucks. But for everybody else, if you want to engage with me after the live stream, you want to talk with me about things, want to see me just chilling and relaxing with no filter, click the link for the Twitch in the chat here. I'll get it again. There you go. I'll be live there after YouTube. Always. Unlucky Meteor. Anyone in uniform should have formal combat training and be up to date from month to month. Every 6 months, if they're too fat or slow or unable to complete the test, they should be rejected. Well, the thing that we used to do is that we would train every day. So PT was always a mixture of different things. You'd have like your warm-up, your workout, and then hand-to-hand training. And that would be every single day. So, you know, but we would split it up in between the different things we're training for. You know what I'm saying? Progressive Cynic at BlastCapBadger. If you militarize police, a heavy focus needs to be put on making sure they understand basic rights Americans are due. They can't treat America like it's a combat zone. Here's the thing. Okay. We need to understand and comprehend that certain areas in America are a combat zone. They are. Southside Chicago. Okay. Places in Los Angeles, or actually all of Los Angeles right now. Seattle, Washington. At the Chaz or Chop, whatever you want to call it. Portland, Oregon's poorer areas. The places where the most violence and crime happens are a war zone. No, absolutely not. Can you try to make it be like, okay, it's just this? No, No. I'm not saying that you come in with tanks and aircraft and like, crew served weapons. I'm not saying that at all. But we need to do a basic militarization of police and law enforcement so that they are prepared and they are ready. And also, okay, just like the military, there has to be consequences for doing bad stuff for everyone, equally across the board. If we're going to militarize the police, they should be held to the same standard as the military. Okay? If I decide I'm just going to shoot a kid just to shoot a kid, I'm going to prison for life. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Okay? So, yeah, like those places are war zones. They are. When you have a heavy amount of crime and violence going on in an area, that's a war zone. Treat it as such, but just like in the military, place an emphasis on protecting the civilian population that is not directly involved with the violence and the combatants. That's how the military operates. The progressive cynic. They need some serious civics education with a focus on the Bill of Rights and relevant limitations to police power. Yes, most certainly. Unlucky Meteor. Yes, I know. It was an opening fight back in 2007. I had a real shot. My trainer was on the UFC TV show. The rib break was devastating. I was too soft on my opponent. I suffered. Treat every opponent equally and treat them all as if they're going to destroy you. Never underestimate anyone. Brandon Peters. So should cops be given tanks, or other police officers in different nations are way more effective than the USA and they don't have nearly as much firepower? Here's the thing. It's a different culture. America is a conglomeration of cultures of all different types. We have so many different more cultures here than anywhere else on the planet. Brandon Peters, you cannot compare the United States to any other country. You just can't. There is no comparison. We have a much different culture. We have so many different cultures that it makes a whole new unique one that's a conglomeration of them all combined. You can't do that, my man. You can't do that. But no, I'm not saying tanks. Okay? I'm not saying crew serve weapons. But I'm saying a basic militarization. Brandon Peters, I've seen a guy with a machete versus 30 UK cops, took him down, no one hurt or dead. It took 30 cops to take him down. It took 30 cops. It should take a lot less. A lot less. Brandon Peters, bundle of joy yours is wanting attention. Give me a sec. Okay, give me a sec, y'all. Give me a sec. All right, I am back. Okay. Unlucky media, progressive cynic. Sorry to hear that. Some of these people have no frame of reference going in. They think that they're supposed to damage as hard as they can. It's not about that. No, it's not. But with the proper look, if we militarize the police and they get the proper training, just like the military does, you can be very, very effective, efficient, but you will minimize any type of damage. I would know. I've done it dozens of times. Unlucky meteor. It's about training how to do that if your life is on the line on the streets, not doing it to your classmate. Yep. Brandon Peters. Yeah, the UK is a real problem with knives. Here's the thing. I don't care what weapons you take away and make illegal. Criminals will always have them. There's always going to be a black market. And on top of that, if people want to hurt other people or unalive other people, they're going to find a way to do it. There's so many different ways you can unalive someone. It's stupendously beyond the reach of anybody to control. Progressive cynic. To be fair, he was a white belt that had just been training for a few months. Good guy overall, and we kept training together until he reached purple belt. Let me see. Progressive cynic. Some people just don't give respect while training. My collarbone got snapped in a similar situation when I let go of standing rear naked and the guy spiked me. Ouch. Brandon Peters. Yeah, that's true. America is definitely a melting pot. And also, I guess the UK cops could have just shot him. I know that's what U.S. police would do, but the bobbies are different, obviously. Yeah. Progressive cynic. UK police are starting to militarize. They have been less armed because their violent crime has been low, but spiking knife crime is changing that. Good. Unlucky meter. Sorry to hear that. Some of these people give no frame of reference. I've already read that. Read that one too. Okay, Brandon Peters. One might say knife crime in the UK has had a sharp increase. Brandon Peters. Training is key, although military operations versus police work is different. Not too much, not really. Okay. In the military, we do so police do like a lower standard of operations versus the military. Much lower standard. Much lower. Okay. In the military, what we have several different equivalents of what the police do, but we do it to a much higher standard. Much higher standard. That's why I believe in the militarization of police. That's why I believe in that. And also, you would need to expand the departments and the law enforcement personnel. You'd have to increase them. You need to. Okay? Heck, in my local area alone, there's one police officer for every 30,000 people. Just one. No, that number needs to be greatly increased. All right. So there we have it, folks. There we have it. All right. So this has been fun. I love doing this. I do. I really do, y'all. I like y'all. I love y'all. You're awesome. I love talking to you. I love making stuff for you. Unfortunately, it's not very cost effective to keep doing this. So I'll ask y'all, every single one of you, if you can, okay? There's a pinned comment on the chat. There's also a link in the description box of this live stream. Please join the channel, okay? The more of y'all that join the channel, okay, the more cost effective this will become. It's not free. It's not cheap anymore. Thanks to all the stuff that Biden is doing. So that's why I encourage people to join the channel. So that I can keep doing this as much as I like. And also, I'll be free to do a lot more stuff that y'all like without having to worry about copyright and all that crud. So the more people that join the channel, the more stuff I can do, and the more frequently I can do it. So please click that link that's in the chat or in the description box and join the channel. Do that 1 monthly thing, and y'all could help out considerably. So that being said, be good. Please be good. There's enough hurt, pain, and suffering in the world. We don't need to add to it. So just be as good as you can. Okay? Be safe. Never, ever compromise on safety and security. Never. I don't care if you're working. Okay? I don't care if you live in a place. If they make you compromise safety and security, leave that place of work. Leave that place you live in. Move somewhere where you're allowed to ensure your personal safety and security and that of your family and friends. And at work. And make a good life for yourselves. You can't do that if you end up making yourself a willing victim. If you choose to be prey to the bad stuff out there, that's your fault for not choosing to make sure that you are not prey. If you're a willing victim, that's on you. So, that being said, I'll be on Twitch here shortly. I hope to see some of y'all there. I'll be playing some games with the boys, having a good old time. And BlastCapBadger out.